Well, during COP, what will we see in the streets of Glasgow?
Well, we're going to see a lot of activity, John. We're going to see 10,000 police officers deployed at various points throughout the city and more broadly across Scotland, but we're also going to see a number of significant events happening within the city at one particular time. There's a conference itself, of course. There's a number of ancillary events that are happening in the environs of the SEC, and there's also a number of movements that people will see from the world leaders, because there's a state dinner on the 1st of November, and 120 plus world leaders who are going to have to be moved about the country and moved about that busy urban environment that is Glasgow. So it's going to be very busy for a couple of weeks.
Will we see armed officers in Glasgow?
Yes, some of the officers will be armed, not them all, certainly not the majority, but there will be some armed officers, as you would expect with 120 plus world leaders, to make sure that we can, one, make sure we deliver our basic purpose, which is to create the environment, a safe and secure environment where this event can take place. And it's not a security event, it is a climate conference. We want to make sure that it can take place safely and that politicians can hopefully deliver their job and actually create a safe and successful event.
That's outside the zone, within the UN conference campus, as it were. That's UN territory, United Nations territory, so you're not in there, is that right?
No, but we may be invited in if something in extremis happens. So the blue zone, as it's referred to, is UN territory, albeit it still comes within Scottish law, and it will be policed with a small p by UN security staff. Obviously, if something happens, if there's a significant crime, if there's a risk to life, or if there's just a bit of an emergency, if there's a collapse of part of a building, we will be called in at that point, and there are protocols to allow us to go in very, very quickly if that happens.
You said 10,000 officers will be deployed. More than half of these will be coming from outside of Police Scotland. And there are different policing standards across the UK. How can you guarantee that these standards will be consistent?
Well, that's been a very important part of our planning and preparation for COP26 over the last couple of years. So we've had significant briefing and engagement programmes with up to 7,000 police officers from outside Scotland who'll be coming to help us police the operation. But it's really important to remember that every one of those police officers is under the direction and control of the Chief Constable of Police Scotland. That is unambiguous, and we've been really clear about the standards that we expect. We will deliver a friendly and a tolerant and a facilitative policing operation, because a vast majority of people who come and want to protest are deeply concerned about this issue of global concern. Can you guarantee
that? Because that'll be up to the protesters, surely. How they behave will dictate how you police, surely.
No, and that's a fair challenge, and we can guarantee it up to the point where the protester behaviour changes. We expect that the majority of protesters will want to come and protest peacefully and lawfully and respectfully. There will, of course, we can anticipate, and we're prepared for this, be a minority who don't want to do so. We will not tolerate, we will not accept anybody who engages in violent behaviour, major disruptive behaviour, or who wants to cause damage to the life of the city. We will not accept that.
We have heard rumours, and we've heard that your intelligence will doubtless have informed you of it, that one of the tactics of the demonstrators will be that they will try to ensure as many arrests as possible, as early as possible, to clog up the system, tie up a number of police officers, and then other protesters will get involved. Are you prepared for that? How can you deal with that?
Yes, we are prepared for it. We have a number of contingencies in place. Obviously, we hope we don't have to make hundreds of arrests per day. If we have to, we've built in a significant amount of additional capacity into the system, both processing capacity for people who may be arrested, cellular capacity to move people to the courts very quickly.
This is against a backdrop of so many legal delays now because of COVID and all the rest of it. So how's that going to actually work? The plans may be there, but practically, how's it going to work?
Well, practically, the system's been starting to prepare and think about COP26 as well, not just policing, but also we've been working really closely with the Crown Office and with the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service to make sure that if we do end up with hundreds of arrests per day, the system can cope. Won't be easy. There'll be some challenges around that. You can't make hundreds of arrests per day and it not be challenging, but we've got the contingency plans in place that if that happens, we will be able to respond quickly and effectively.
Now, if people in Glasgow are trying to go about their business, and as we've seen before COP, even events in elsewhere in the UK, protesters blocking routes, closing roads. Now, okay, Kingston Bridge, Clyde Tunnel, the police may be there, but what about elsewhere? What will you allow the public to do? What would you expect them to do if their day is being disrupted?
Well, we can understand the public frustrations. I mean, we're members of the public as well. We've still got to drive about and take our kids to school and go and visit families. So we absolutely understand the frustration. And we've looked at protests, particularly from Extinction Rebellion and some of its offshoots in other parts of the United Kingdom over the last number of months. What I would ask the public to do, though, and Glasgow's a city that's got a proud tradition of protest and welcoming protest, but there has to be a balance and there has to be a bit of common sense and perspective applied to this. So, if the protest is non-disruptive, if it doesn't largely affect the working life of the city, that's fine. I think people will be largely happy with that. The minute it starts to majorly impact or disrupt the life of the city, we'll step in.
But if you're not there, so if it's a side road and there's an ambulance trying to get through, what do the public do? If it's an emergency, if they're even just trying to get to their work, what should the public do?
Well, we would hope that the protesters would have enough wit and sense that if it's an ambulance, to let an emergency vehicle through.
But if not, and if the public do get involved, will you prosecute them?
Well, let's be clear about perspective, because there are 10,000 police officers who are going to be deployed in this operation across the whole of Scotland. So what we would ask the public to do is to call us. There will be a COP very close to you, and we'll get there very, very quickly. So rather than step in and put yourself at risk and somebody ends up getting hurt, call us. We'll be there very quickly. We'll deal with it.
What if people do take the law into their own hands?
Well, if that's the case, then we'll have to assess those situations dependent on the circumstances at the time. And it depends exactly what members of the public do. It's impossible to give a simple or a straightforward answer to that, because it is entirely circumstances dependent. But don't put yourself in that position. There's a lot of cops out there. Please just call us and we'll deal with that. But hopefully common sense will prevail and nobody will think it's sensible to stand in the middle of the road and block an ambulance.
The focus will be on COP. What about policing elsewhere in the community, elsewhere in the country? Can people expect certain things to be overlooked? Will regular crime be got away with, for want of a better phrase?
Absolutely not. We've spent a lot of time looking at our contingency plans for just business as usual, normal policing. So of course we'll continue to prioritise emergency calls. So if the public need us quickly, they'll get us quickly. That they can be absolutely assured about. For non-emergency calls, of course, we ask for a wee bit of forbearance. We put a number of contingency plans in place, additional resources out in our 13 divisions, policing divisions across Scotland. But inevitably there's going to be some small-scale disruption for an operation of this size over 2 weeks. So we're just asking for a wee bit of forbearance, but with that absolute assurance that if you need us quickly in an emergency, you will still get us quickly.
Are you expecting a spike in crime, other crime, domestic crime as it were?
No, we're not, but we have planned, just in case that does happen, we have a number of very good partnerships, and our specialist officers will still be available the whole way throughout this event. So it doesn't matter about this very large event that's being policed separately. If you need us, if you're vulnerable, if you need our support, if you need our help, you pick up the phone, you get exactly the same service, and we will be there to support and help you as quickly as you need us to be.
What is about the basis for big companies, banks, even threats to them, damage to them? What can you do? So, for example, some people might think of episodes that have happened in Glasgow recently in which groups have been corralled, as it were. They haven't spread anywhere else, but they caused a lot of damage within the area. George Square, I'm thinking of particularly. Is that what you're going to do if certain companies, certain headquarters are targeted? How will you deal with that?
Well, you'll understand we're not going to talk about operational tactics in advance, but what we can give that assurance is if the crowd start to cause damage to commercial or other premises, we have a significant amount of public order resource available to us, and if we need to use it, we'll use it. Again, our plea to everybody who's going to come to protest at this critically important event in Glasgow is exercise your lawful rights respectfully, peacefully and lawfully. If you do so, there won't be any issues with policing. We'll make sure that we facilitate your rights, but if you don't, we'll step in very quickly.
There's going to be a lot of pressure on your police officers, demands from both sides. What about their well-being? This is going to be a difficult time for them.
It is, and that's an incredibly important question. We've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can look after our own officers and staff over this protracted period of time where they're going to be working long hours away from their families, not only officers and staff within Police Scotland, but those who are travelling from elsewhere in the United Kingdom to come and support us. So we put a lot of thought and time and effort into how we can look after them, a lot of time and effort into basic logistics. We've got to house people, feed them, we've got to transport them about. All of those things have been taken into account.
This is one of the biggest police operations ever in the UK. Are you nervous?
We're not nervous. I think we're always apprehensive on behalf of the public. That's our job, to make sure that they're safe. Our job is to make sure that this event can take place in a safe and secure environment. So we're not nervous. We've been planning for this. We have a lot of experience of this within Scotland, and we're prepared for it. We just need the public and protesters' help and support to make sure that politicians have can get on with their job of actually creating a successful conclusion and hopefully agreement at the end of this process.
Deputy Chief Constable Will Kerr, thanks for joining us in Scotland.
Thank you very much.